What is up, everybody? Welcome to the show. This is the Fantasy Football Fanatics podcast, the official podcast of the fantasyfootballfanatics.com. This is the show for Tuesday, February 6th. I am your host, Griffin Palmer, and I am joined by a man who finished second place in all of his fantasy football leagues, a man who finished second place in Pro Bowl fantasy football, a man who finished second place in the NFL Playoff Challenge, but his team just finished first place where it matters most, the one, the only CJ the Hitman Hickman. CJ, what's up, buddy?
What's up, man? Super Bowl champion.
Oh, man. See, I know there's so much more energy in you, but I feel like you've been burning. I don't think you've slept yet, and I can hear in your voice you've been screaming quite a bit. How are you feeling, man?
I'm exhausted, man. I've been partying all night Sunday. Monday, I took the day off, went into the job.
Understandable.
I'm a bowler, so I went in there, bowled. There was a couple leagues, that I was messing with, man. That were talking trash to me about the season. Played a little, Queens, we are the champions. As they were coming in, did a nice full lap around the alley, just flapping my wings. You know what I'm saying, and just talking my trash. Spitting straight facts. Just straight facts, man. And then to know that the parade is going on down Thursday. Wish on everything. I'm debating if I want to call in sick, but I do got to get this money. Daddy got to buy. Daddy got to buy some gear.
Yeah.
Daddy got to buy some gear, so you got to show up for work.
You got to get all that 1 year, Super Bowl champion new gear that you get to wear for a whole year. I understand that.
Yeah, man. I got to get all that gear. But this, I mean, we're gonna get into this, but man, it was just an incredible moment. Tears were shed. On the edge of my seat, and I don't want to spoil anything, but we'll definitely get into it.
Oh yeah, we're gonna dive into it, and just to, I'm completely in support of making that trip. Because at the time when the Ravens won the Super Bowl a couple years back, I was living in Philly, and I took the day off, drove down to Baltimore, and I was there for the festivities. So I get it, man. I totally do. That's your team, and that's your championship. So and your first one, so you gotta do it. So yeah, we'll get there, and try and keep you awake through the show because I can see you're dragging, partying with no concerns about the early morning podcast recording. But it's all good. It's all good.
Absolutely. I mean, you were debating. You were a little bit. Look at me, can't even talk. I'm just saying you were that close of this being a one-man show. I got to be honest. But
yes,
I'm first fighting through it. And then, just want to be here for the people.
By now, everybody probably noticing that Jason Cabrera has not appeared on this show. He will not be joining us. I think he is on some sort of harm to himself. I don't want to go as far as say suicide watch because that seems insensitive. But he's definitely
on family duty. He's a family guy. You know what I mean? Pun intended. He's on family duty. Right now.
So I think that's a likely excuse. I think he just doesn't want to be the only fan of a franchise that hasn't won a Super Bowl on the show anymore. So.
I mean, I see where you're going there. I would be all about it, but this the kind. I don't know. Is this something about the Super Bowl is bringing a kinder side?
CJ the Hitman Hickman.
I can't do it when he's not here.
Is it time? Is it time to let the Hitman go, CJ?
Well, no. I mean, that's just me. I mean, I've always been that, through my schooling and everything and going throughout the neighborhood. So I'll never lose that. But right now, it's just a somber CJ the Hickman, Super Bowl champion Hickman right now. So, I'm just cooling right now, man. Just cooling.
Maybe you're just crashing and you'll be there to, rip into him when we see him again on Friday. But
that could be possible.
It's possible. Probable, I would say. Though, I don't know, you'll probably be pretty tired after that, too, because if I know you, I'm guessing you're probably going to be at that parade. So, we'll see. Anyway, we do have an amazing show for everybody today. Today, we're going to be talking about some interesting facts related to the 2017 fantasy football season. I know we said we were going to start talking about our quarterback recap, but we wanted to try and get everybody on board. And some more stats that we're trying to finalize before we get to that. We want to make sure we give you guys the best analysis that we can because, of course, these are the shows that you guys are going to hold on to all off season long until you get to our rankings and so on and so forth. And even then, because it really recaps what happened. So it's the important shows. We want to make sure we're as ready for those as possible. We're going to recap the Super Bowl. We're going to bring you all the top headlines from around the league. Lots of stuff to get to, and we're going to try and fit it all in under an hour. And, of course, please make sure you guys subscribe wherever you're listening. Remember, we are a year-round show. Just because the Super Bowl has happened, we are not going anywhere. We are now switching gears. We can start winding down from the year that was 2017 season, start turning the clock over, looking at the upcoming rookies and, the draft, free agency, the whole nine as we move into the 2018 fantasy football season. So, guys, stick with us every Tuesday and Friday. And if you want to go a step further, join us over on patreon.com/the Fantasy Football Fanatics. Get yourself a bonus episode every single week. Much more. It's advanced, it's in-depth, it's really good stuff, and it can only be found there for our members that help support the show. And it's not a big commitment, and we greatly appreciate it.
I'm about to say it's so good, man. If you want unfiltered entertainment and with the fantasy and banter, that's where you go. I mean, we appreciate you guys coming to this. Yeah. But man, if you want to see us raw and uncut, that's where you need to go.
The gloves come off over there, that's for sure.
Yeah, it sure does.
It's a good time, though, we promise. So, again, that is at patreon.com/the Fantasy Football Fanatics. Just go to Patreon and search for the show, The Fantasy Football Fanatics. You'll find us either way. Yes, let's go ahead and dive right in and start talking about what we've kind of already popped the cap to, and that is the Super Bowl recap. So, CJ, I can think of no better person to take this away than you. Of course, I just have to say, a game that, coming from a defensive-minded team like myself, really felt like watching a game of Madden. I mean, one punt in the entire game. It was like, oh, you scored, watch this. I mean, how... Okay, so it was an entertaining game for me, even though it wasn't the defensive struggle I love. But how's the blood pressure now that it's all over, CJ?
Oh, man. Well, listen, I mean, if you were following, if you wasn't living under a rock, basically, all throughout the whole week leading up to Sunday, man, it's all been talking about this Eagles defense going against Tom Brady, the pass rush affecting him, the corners, be able to, contain, or even some analysts were saying shut down the wide receivers of the Patriots. Or how are you going to stop Gronk coming off that concussion? And just like you said, it was just like a absolutely arena football type Super Bowl game, man. I mean, Foles goes down, scores a touchdown, Brady comes right back. They get in field goal range, just doing stuff like that, man. So, I mean, as an Eagles fan watching the game, I already knew what I was going to get out of Brady, but I just knew how my defense was playing. And one thing that was coming to my mind at I think it was like the third quarter. At the beginning of the third quarter, when they were just walking down the field with Brady and Gronk, I was like, this is kind of why I wanted the Eagles to take advantage of this opportunity. I mean, people were talking about when Carson went down and Foles took over, that they were going to get bumped out. I mean, can you just imagine? I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but can you just imagine if Aaron Rodgers didn't get hurt? Those Packers would have been in that position. I mean, I probably wouldn't even face the Falcons. I probably would have went to Green Bay, or I would have probably played Minnesota possibly that first week, that second week, and then possibly Green Bay. It's something about these very intelligent quarterbacks that have the experience and then have that quick trigger that this Eagles defense struggles with. These corners were getting straight abused by Tom Brady. Going into zone, they get out of that, they go to man, and just because the way the scheme is with Jim Schwartz, you got corners playing off 10, sometimes it feels like 15 yards, and Brady's just dink and dunk, take a couple shots, dink and dunk, and then touchdown. So it was very stressful, but I mean, I got to give the Patriots their credit. Tom Brady, he played one hell of a game. I mean, over 500 yards in a Super Bowl. That is crazy. I mean, I'm so glad that we won, because I do not want the memes to start that the best defense in the season to get to the Super Bowl and give up over 500 yards. Over what? I mean, what was it, like 1,700 yards total for passing? Offensive yards. It was something crazy like that, right?
Total offense was something crazy like that.
Yeah, it was something crazy. It was ridiculous what this game brought. But I mean, shouts out to the Patriots. They played one hell of a game. I mean, five Super Bowls, you can't take. There's nothing to scoff at. I mean, I appreciate them just letting me have this one. And then, I mean, look, I've been talking crap about my defense, but they came up in the clutch when it was needed. They got the strip sack by Brandon Graham and then picked it up, and then that basically sealed the game after Jake Elliott field goal.
Yeah, the total yardage, of course, 1,151 yards.
Yeah,
I
something
mean,
crazy like that.
I think I remember seeing that was more than 200 yards than any other Super Bowl before it. And didn't they say that was the most yardage in any single game?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
wow.
Yeah.
So I mean, a lot of fun, and definitely. We're going to be getting to these fun facts later on. Different from the pace that we saw throughout the season, where scoring was down across the league. I mean, this league has been trying to gear itself more and more towards these offensive shootouts, and here we finally got one in the Super Bowl. And Nick Foles looking like a guy who's definitely going to be he's going to be traded, and he's going to be traded for a lot. I would assume, because the Eagles know they can get a lot for him. I mean, what do you put the chances are that he actually stays in Philadelphia for next season?
I mean, I gotta consider it to be high. I mean, for me personally, as a fan of him, and and everything that he's done for the organization, I would like him. I mean, it depends on him, but for me personally, I would like him to get traded to the right situation, just so he could be able to get a new deal. I mean, that means his family is going to be set, and then he can continue to go out there and play the game that he loves now. I mean, he has a newfound love again for. I mean, you follow his story. After that situation with Chip Kelly, and then sending him to the Rams and going through a bad place, this guy was contemplating retirement. You know what I mean? Contemplating retirement, went through a dark place, found strength, and found his way through faith, and got a situation where Andy Reid brought him in, and then after that was done, he comes to Philly, and now look at this, the man comes in, fills in for a starting quarterback, and Carson Wentz plays a good game. Gets criticized, I mean, like freaking nobody's business for like good 3 weeks. And then each and every week throughout the playoffs, he gets no respect. I mean, he went out there, basically earned it every single week. And then he gets to the Super Bowl, puts in a performance of a lifetime. They do the little trickery, tries to catch the football. Brady doesn't have hands. Foles does the exact same thing, brings that thing in, plus does another 2 touchdowns he throws. He had a crazy performance in the Super Bowl and won the Super Bowl MVP. I mean, he was outstanding. He was outstanding this for the last 2 months.
Have you been seeing all the memes and everything circulating around talking about how
I love him.
What was the one I saw? It was one of Nick Foles all there, and it was like Scooby Doo, and they were pulling his face off like it was a mask, and underneath was Eli Manning. But I mean, it shows now a trend and something that we can talk about going forward. That the answer to beating the Patriots in the Super Bowl is the NFC East. So that's what it comes down to.
I like it. I like it.
I'm strangely comfortable with it. So I mean, we'll see how this all shakes out. Patriots wise, because we're hearing all these rumbles. We know that there's changing coordinators and guys are going new places. But of course, we've also been hearing the stories about how it's the Patriots. Bill Belichick's got guys in the wings that are like 3 deep, ready for when this happens. He does this like this. There's not going to be that much change, or they're prepared for it, and we'll see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, we'll see.
But I mean, like you said, Nick Foles. I mean, fantastic game, Super Bowl MVP, and was pretty close to being in pace with Tom Brady. Tom Brady, 505 yards, 3 touchdowns. Nick Foles, 373 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. So
we ran the ball a lot more than what they did. So that's what it is. I mean, if you took away those rushing yards, that probably convert those to passing. Yeah, he's right there with him.
Absolutely, and of course, we say Foles had that interception, which was really more than anything Alshon Jeffrey's fault.
That was crazy.
But to counter that, Tom Brady fumbled the ball, and that fumble cost the game in a lot of ways, because this was really a matter of whoever scores last is going to win, and that was an essential fumble at a terrible time to fumble. Great defensive stand by the Patriots. They got the ball back, but it was not enough. Isn't it amazing in a game that was so offensive, a game where nobody could really be stopped, that when it mattered the most, defense actually came and won a championship by forcing that fumble. The whole game got changed there. And of course, we also have to sprinkle on Nick Foles' rushing touchdown, or receiving touchdown rather.
I was so nervous. I mean, when they scored that last field goal, put the game up to 8, and it was like 2:21 left. I was like,
I
dog.
said there's too much time. There's way too much
Way
time.
too much time. I was so nervous. I'm like, man, come on, defense. Please give me a stop. Oh no, they were 5 by then. I'm sorry. Yeah, by that time we were up by 5. I was like, please get a stop, and then that's when the strip fumble happened.
Right.
Yeah,
And strip fumble, field goal, put them up by
yeah,
8, and then still too much time as far as I'm
yeah.
concerned. Because because we all, of course, the three of us, CJ, Jason, and myself, we talk regularly throughout the week on a private messenger client, and we all talked as soon as the game was over, and we were talking about how this was way too much time. And I had even said to the people who I was watching the Super Bowl live with, if Tom Brady, and I mentioned this to you guys, if Tom Brady makes this happen, drives down the field, gets a touchdown, and gets a 2-point conversion, I might actually concede that he is the GOAT. I as a noted Tom Brady just hater, he rubs me the wrong way a lot of the time. I respect the hell out of him, for what he's done in his career, but you know what? Maybe it's the rivalry aspect.
Very salty individual as well. I mean, his post game interviews.
Oh, of course.
He's been reported saying that the Eagles' only good play throughout that whole game was that strip fumble.
Oh, absolutely.
Very salty individual. Tom Brady is.
And this is all informing why I feel the way I do about him. But neither here nor there. I mean, for me to say that, and I meant it, because I mean, if it happened, you got to say it, because I would have forced overtime, and then we're talking about a whole nother game, and how crazy would that be? 2 back-to-back overtime Super Bowls when it had never happened before. So, watching.
That's enough of that. We didn't need that. We didn't want that either.
Yeah, in the end, of course, a Hail Mary, which was batted down, and the game ended, and the confetti fell, and first-time Super Bowl champion, Philadelphia Eagles. So, I mean, what a great game. And, I've heard all these comparisons of this being like a Rocky story of, Nick Foles out there. And I've even heard comparisons, which made me laugh a little bit, talking about being Rocky. It's like a Rocky fight, because if you watch, especially, what was it, Rocky 4 against the Russian, where there was no defense at all. Because this is something I joke about all the time. For the listeners who don't know, I also teach mixed martial arts. And there's just no defense in those movies, especially in that fight. They were literally just punching each other in the face with every single hit. Not a single blocked punch for like the entire fight. And, fights don't go that way, but it always makes me laugh. But that, reminiscent of this game. So a Philadelphia hero rises and takes home the gold, and in this case, it's the Super Bowl championship. So, I mean, there it is. But, not to focus just on that. I mean, the Patriots, a lot of good things to talk about here as well, fantasy aspect-wise. And, of course, if we break down our NFL playoff challenge-wise, holy crap, CJ, did you see what the final score was?
You got me like, 10 points, right?
12 points with all those multipliers that you had hot on my heels, and we separated from the pack pretty effectively.
Yeah, I mean, but of course, it was Brady. We had Alshon. Jai didn't get into the end zone. I feel like that's going to change though next year though. But that's for later episodes. But man. And then when Brandon Cooks, we forgot to mention, when Brandon Cooks got knocked out early, that was basically it. And then of course, we both had Gronk. So
92 points for Gronk.
We had a lot of the same players. So, but surprisingly, and one thing, last thing for me is while the game was going on. And if you guys listen to the, I think it was on the Friday show.
We mentioned it on Friday, but we really deep dove on Patreon.
So on Patreon, just a little shout out, just a little glimpse. Once again, you should do it. You should get on that. It's really good stuff. Griffin was asking me some guys that I think that should probably step up in this game, or some surprising names. Guys that I said that was going to step up was going to be Chris Hogan and Rex Burkhead.
You 100% called it with him. And
I was so upset that these guys are showing out. And I was like, damn it, I couldn't be wrong once. Please. Just stop getting points for me, please.
Because you didn't play them. Because you had who did you play? I don't have your team. I have my team in front of me.
I had LeGarrette Blount. He scored a touchdown. And then I had Ajayi. Wide receivers, I had Alshon and Cooks. Tom Brady's quarterback. And then Gronk as a tight end. And then I had Gostkowski as the kicker. I wish I would have changed him to Elliott. Elliott scored more points. And then what's called the Phillies defense that just got shredded.
All right, so yeah, we did have a lot of overlap there. I, of course, as I mentioned a little bit on Friday's show, but I went more in depth on the Patreon show talking about how I knew I was in the lead, but I had far fewer multipliers than you did, so I knew that in order for me to have any chance here, I had to go contrarian, so I did. I played James White. That turned out to be a good call there. I played LeGarrette Blount. I didn't know you were going to play LeGarrette Blount as well. I didn't know you were going to start 2 Eagles, so that obviously didn't help me as much as it could have. I played Danny Amendola, which, Brandon Cooks was the obvious choice, but went with Amendola. Should have gone with your Hogan call. That was... Whew, yeah, that would have been the kind of the icing on top. But all these kind of contrarian plays were able to get me a boatload of points that were able to edge you out just barely. So if this has gone to overtime, I doubt I would have. I doubt I would have been able to. So yeah. And then where did Jason finish? I
think Jason dropped he dropped like down. It was like 6 or something like that.
Jason in our group, he went from 3rd. Oh, he didn't go too far down. He finished 5th. So, not too bad. A couple people jumped up into 3rd and 4th, of course, some listeners. So well done, guys. So, good job. Who is it? Aliens in My Closet. So whoever that is jumped into 3rd place. That was well, who was that? He said, I think that was a YouTube listener, was it not? I believe there was a comment on YouTube talking about his All Patriots lineup, and he did. He had all Patriots players.
Yeah, he did. Hey, suck it. How about that?
All Patriots players.
Lineup.
He started the same lineup every single week. So, man, he had Hogan in there too. Chris Hogan with a ×4 multiplier got 72 points in that game.
Ooh.
That's a lot. But the New England Patriots defense, even with a ×4 multiplier, got -8 points. So there you go. Man, it's those little things that make all the difference. So, Rex Burke had 20 points with a 4-point multiplier. So, again, I made the right call with James White. I see. I really thought I played Dion Lewis because I knew the volume was the play there. That's what we talked about all season long. But James White was the contrarian play, so I went with him, and it worked out. So, yeah, NFL Playoff Challenge is in the books. I'll happily take home that title, knowing that my Ravens had no chance at the Super Bowl. And I guess anything else we want to talk about from this game? I mean, I know we'll reference it analytically for weeks going forward, but anything you want to recap before we move on, CJ?
I mean, it was just crazy, man. I mean, outside of the game, the stories are beautiful, man. People's players, family members, and friends passing away, and then be able to do this thing for them. And I saw a post of looked like somebody's dad or something that recently passed away, and they were a big Eagles fan, and they basically just took the newspaper from saying Top Dog with a picture of Nick Foles and just laid it right there next to their on top of their grave, and saying love your dad, or I know you were watching down, or something like that. It was just little good stories hearing after the game that kind of warms your heart a little bit if you're an Eagles fan, or you're just just an all around good person, just like good football, just like to hear good stories. That was one of the things that got me.
In between all the showings of these just stupid things that some of the, I don't want to call them rioters because there was no big riot, but there was some shenanigans happening that just puzzled me.
I would say this. I mean, you've been living in Philly, and then me as an Eagles fan, this is a Philly thing. I mean, you can't expect anything else. I mean, this is a city that has been in a drought for like 25 plus years of of the championship.
Other than baseball.
Outside of the baseball, but I really don't count that. But you know what I mean? So that outside of that, it's been a tough place to be. So I mean, you get this, and then being underdogs the whole time. I mean, expect 20 people to stand on top of a Marriott canopy and watch it break down. Expect people to start taking down traffic signs and carrying them around,
rolling cars and starting fires, and some people eating horse poop.
I don't know what. That was too much.
Yeah,
that was too much. Everything else I'm with, but that horse eating horse crap, that was where I'm like, come on, guy, what are we doing here?
And sorry for if this is a little too graphic for our younger listeners, but I mean it happened. So
yes, it did.
I didn't even watch the video. I saw it. It started to autoplay, and I just scrolled right past. I was like, nope, I don't need to see that. But I'm on record. You know, we both have ties to the city. You are a longtime fan. I lived there. I am on record saying that this team needs a Super Bowl. I think the fans deserve it. They got it. And I also am on record saying that one way or another, Philly was going to burn, win or loss. And there were some small fires. It did not burn to the ground, which is good. But we'll see. The week is young because, of course, the team returns and the parades and the ceremonies and more to come. So we'll see how this all plays out. And I guess with that, we will move on. And let's move on to some of our, I was going to say top headlines, but it is top headlines. So we're going to start with a note that, again, Super Bowl happened. Philadelphia won 41-33. If you've been living under a rock, we've been talking about it. And we'll start with some league-wide headlines, starting with the fact that Detroit has officially announced that they have hired New England Patriots defensive coordinator Matt Patricia as their new head coach. So no surprise there. We were expecting this. And, I mean, a guy who his defense just got shredded.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta be a little concerned as a Detroit Lions fans watching that defense just get pummeled.
It was one game, two incredibly well-coached teams, as I have been saying for a while now, good offensive minds, and 2 weeks to prep. And we didn't even get to this, so I guess we can talk about it now, or should I put it in the other news? No, we're still on the subject, so we'll talk about it now. Malcolm Butler being benched for this game, their arguably best corner, definitely top 2 corner, and he didn't play anything but special teams?
Yeah.
What?
I mean, from what I'm hearing, and I try to dig in deep to find out what's going on, and I talked to Patriots fans. It had something to do with an illness. So he must have suffered an illness this week or last week, and he tried to push through it, got to the team late, was kind of not really doing anything in practice, and that's basically what happened. I'm just as shocked as you. I mean, if he was healthy enough to do special teams, I mean, at least get a couple snaps, but maybe they just thought he was going to be too much of a liability out there, and that's why they didn't do it.
See, I have talked to some sources and that have linked to the team, and everything I'm hearing right now is that even like people on the defensive coaching side didn't know that this was happening until the game was basically starting. Malcolm Butler thought he was starting. Even what's his name? Blanking on it. The guy who started in his place. Yeah, Rode. He didn't even know he was starting until like right as the game was getting ready to kick off. He said, "Wait, what?" So, what I have heard is that essentially this was a perfect storm, quote unquote, of this illness. As you mentioned, he did have a bad week in practice, and that was whether it's technical or coming off of his illness. And he apparently also did violate some rules within the team. So. I think it was related to a curfew, if I'm remembering correctly. So it looked like kind of a perfect storm, and they threw him out there for special teams. So clearly he was healthy enough to play. So, I mean, do you think, and I know that it's raw and we haven't gotten a chance to come down off the high of the Eagles win yet and really start diving into it more analytically. But, I mean, here it is, less than 24 hours old. Well, it's a little bit more than that when we're recording now. But, I mean, do you think if Brandon Cooks has the peripheral vision to see that hit coming and he's able to stay in the game, and Malcolm Butler plays, do you think this game goes a different way? Because you have to assume it at least have been different.
I do think it would have been different. I think that, like I was saying about, when we were talking about the show on Friday, I thought Nelson Aguilar, he did play a good role, but I think he would have been a lot more involved, because then you're switching Butler to be on most likely Jeffries. I know people were saying that he was going to, that Stephon Gilmore was going to be on him, but I think Butler would have been on him, and then I would have moved Stephon Gilmore to the to guard the number 2 receiver, which was Torrey Smith. And then Eric Rowe would have been on Nelson Aguilar. So and then on the other side with Cooks, I mean, that was just I mean, I really hate wide receivers going backwards instead of just going forward. And that was a prime position of reasoning for that. Not only are you losing yards, but you're leaving yourself open for a blind side hit. Now, the hit was legal. I saw people trying to scoff at that.
He was a runner at that point.
Yeah, he was a runner. That was a legal hit. And, I'm sorry that I'm sorry that he had to go down like that. But that's what happens when you start taking the ball backwards as a receiver instead of just going straight up the field.
Yeah, he was going diagonally, kind of backwards a little bit, and he ran right into the guy. Never even saw him coming. It was it Jenkins?
Yeah, it was Jenkins.
Yeah,
Jenkins did that.
But from what I'm seeing and hearing, Gilmore, Stephon Gilmore, cornerback for the Patriots, he has had a long history this whole season of covering the biggest receiver. That's kind of been the way they've been doing their assignments. So I'm not sure necessarily that would have changed. But based on what we saw in the first half, Gilmore was not on Jeffries. He was not shadowing him. It looked like their strategy was going to have each one of these guys cover their side of the field because they both play better on their respective sides.
Yeah,
and I think I think that's the way they were going to move it. And then when they made the it was around halftime, right? When they made the adjustment that Gilmore was shadowing Jeffrey. So that's when we get to more of I think what everybody was expecting.
Second quarter. I think it was the second quarter and he did that because I remember there was
a
huge pass interference call that I didn't get. That I was outraged by, but realized that who I was playing and the officials that were doing it, so I just had to swallow it.
Yeah, I mean, this was a game. If we want to get to officiating, that's a whole nother can of worms. They really were pretty much letting them play in this game because there was a number of pass interference calls that they did not call, which I was like, interesting. A lot of times that they were playing players and not turning their heads, playing the ball on both sides. So I don't want to say this was swaying one side or the other, but as a whole, they were definitely letting them play. But I just find it interesting that they kind of defaulted back to their strategy that they were doing all season long once they made that second quarter adjustment, as you're saying it was, because I can't remember exactly when the change happened. But, so I think that Malcolm Butler not being in this game really threw this defense for a loop. And, of course, give Josh McDaniels, Tom Brady, and Bill Belichick 2 weeks to scheme against the defense. You expect to see them come out and have a pretty good game, even against a good defense like the Eagles. So I have to assume this game would have gone differently if Malcolm Butler was in, and his future with the team now somewhat in question from what I'm hearing. So we'll see.
I think we already knew it was going to happen, especially when they were talking about it. This time, this past off season, they were talking about trading him. They was doing a package deal, might go into the Saints.
Yeah, he was supposed to go to the Saints. That's right.
Yeah. So I think it's already set in stone. I mean, you saw reports after the game saying, they gave up on me, expletive.
Right.
Well, it is what it is.
He dropped some F-bombs, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, man. So he's already this is a guy that's already in his mind, like, ready to get out of there. And, hoping that the team he lands on, that he ends up playing this former team.
Well, I mean, a lot of stuff. And we're diving a little bit more into what we talk about on Patreon now, a little bit more on the defensive side of conversation. So, again, if you like what you're hearing right now, again, patreon.com/the Fantasy Football Fanatics. But I guess let's keep moving with the top headlines from around the league, and let's go to we'll put the Super Bowl conversation to rest. I'm sure Jason's going to have his input when he comes back I think he'll be back on Friday. Maybe he'll have collected himself. And we'll move on to the quarterback news, and we'll start in Houston, where quarterback Deshaun Watson has resumed running as of Monday. So remember, he's coming back from his ACL being repaired, and this injury happened in November. So that's a pretty good turnaround. We reported on Friday's show that he was participating in some light 7-on-7 type drills and now running. So looks like Deshaun Watson is on the mend and probably ahead of schedule at this point. I heard some things saying that he's ahead of their early projections. So yeah, great news there for a guy who was just on fire. He was on pace to set NFL records. Yes, so he's gonna be a really polarizing individual, I think, come draft season. So that'll be a fun guy to kind of start diving on and analyzing a bit. Let's go to this. This is interesting. I had this thought when we heard about the whole Alex Smith news that we reported last week, but I didn't think it was actually going to pass. And here are some reports per ESPN that are saying that impending unrestricted free agent quarterback, Washington quarterback, Kirk Cousins, might not be able to test the open market like he has been planning to. There are now reports that are coming out saying that Washington is considering placing the franchise tag on him anyway so that they can possibly trade him and get something back for him. First off, I'm going to say that's dirty, Washington. Yeah, that's real dirty.
I don't know if I can be surprised. I'm not be surprised by it.
I'm not. They feel like he's done them wrong. He feels like they've done him wrong, and this is just an ugly breakup getting uglier. And I think in a lot of ways they're decentivizing the market because he's now going to have this unbelievable cap hit associated with him. So someone is not only going to have to make a trade for him, but they're going to have to eat that unless they're able to, do the whole. Which they'll put him on an extension, but I'd have to look into how with the free agent tag how that that adjusts going forward. So,
Right.
but I mean that's a huge cap hit. Oh man, so I think they're able to redistribute it, right? Even in a trade. I
I just rather not be talking about this. I'm like, just do the right thing. But I mean, once again, like I said, it not be surprised. This is a very poorly run organization, and they got some bad people in that front office.
Yeah. So I'm looking at it now. So yeah, it looks like because when they franchise tag people, they can contract them. So obviously they still can with a trade, but I'm wondering what happens with the dead cap. So I know I'll Ryan, longtime listeners know Ryan Mitchell, host and
He's a
analyst of the
financial
show.
guy.
Yes, he's a specialist of the cap area, so we'll try and get him back on the show and see if he can weigh in on it. And so things getting a little bit murky in Washington with the future of franchise quarterback Kirk Cousins and his future destination, because he's even implied that he's interested in signing with the Broncos, which we talked about on, I think it was Friday's show, how that was one of the places that we all unanimously saw as a favorite landing spot for him. So Kirk Cousins, things are heating up. So we'll see. And let's move to the running back position, where Arizona Cardinals running back Adrian Peterson has said he wants to play for 4 more years.
Wow. Interesting.
Look, he is, I think we all agree, probably a first ballot Hall of Famer. And I don't know if any team's going to take him for 4 more years unless he's willing to take a veteran minimum and start really kind of showing them, kind of trying to bring along the next generation. Because, look, I love AP, and I think in the right system with the right opportunity, he could still be good. But I think we all agree that his years as an elite, especially fantasy running back, are in the past. He was on 2 different teams this past season, and we barely saw glimpses of the Adrian Peterson of old. CJ, what do you think here?
I mean, his best scenario this past season was when he got to get did his shot with the Cardinals. Outside of that, and even when that happened, when that situation came up, he was only good for a certain amount of time. I mean, because he was the only back there that was effective, to be honest. And so he kind of got burnt out. Now, if he so happens to, like you were saying, get a veteran deal somewhere else, I think he would be good to be that number 2 back. And he has to basically change his mentality now and, be realistic at it and look like, hey, man, look, if I'm going to stay in this league, if I'm going to, get a shot to play 4 more years, I got to make some adjustments to my mindset and to my game. And I'm going to have to be that 3rd down back for whoever team this is and get those short yarders, because I think he can be able to still do that. So, anything, of course, 3rd and 1, anything between 3rd and 4 to 1, I think he would be effective there. And he can still be a benefit to teams. I don't think he's a good receiving back. He never really was. But if you can combine him to like a 1-2 punch, maybe some guy that's pretty elusive, and then, he can be the power, I think that would be a good scenario.
Yeah, well, we'll see, because we've already heard that Arizona is planning to release him. This, of course, we have to actually see happen, but that is the early indications that we've been hearing, the hints.
He could be a good addition to Jacksonville, to be honest. I mean, they're getting rid of Chris Ivory. You might well just add him in there.
Yeah, but, I mean, Fournette and Peterson are a very similar style. They're north-south runners. They're not too involved in the passing game, though they have the ability to somewhat do it. They have Yeldon, I still believe, under contract on his rookie contract to be the pass-catching back. Maybe. They're set up for it, I'll admit that. But we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what the open market holds for Adrian Peterson this time around. Maybe he'll be looking for a better fit than a bigger contract. And then let's wrap up in the tight end position. We'll go back to New England, where the Patriots tight end Rob Gronkowski has said that he is going to look at his future. This was in a interview at the podium post-game, saying that he was contemplating retirement, essentially, and that he was going to reevaluate in the upcoming weeks. So I don't think any of us are expecting Gronk to call it a career, though he's had a fantastic one thus far. CJ, what do you think here?
I mean, this is an interesting, read basically when I read this, and then when I saw it on an interview, when rewatched the interview. When you go look back at Gronk's career, I mean, one interesting fact that's pretty smart, very intelligent of this guy is his salary. I mean, his checks from games, he has not touched not one of them. He's just been banking those and just living off of his endorsements and everything like that. So when it comes to money, money's not an issue. I mean, he's not playing for money right now. I know he's pretty much set, so he can get out of there if he wants to. If he wants to retire, he can, and then he can just make those best decisions because, like you said, his body's been breaking down. I mean, if it was back issues, leg, the plate in his elbow, concussions. I think this concussion thing really,
Yeah.
starting to really hit players and go like, well, hey, listen, man. I mean, they're starting to question why they're really playing this game. I mean, outside of the love, now when you got family involved right there, you don't want to start risking that. So
Family, a very successful career. You've got
right,
money.
you
I
got
I get all that.
right, yeah,
Now, and I agree. The only thing that I'm pointing to right now, because look, injuries, you get banged up playing, middle school football, growing on up.
right,
So I don't think that's necessarily the concern as much as I think it is the recent concussion has him thinking different. Because he's going to be 29 next year, and so he's still very much in the prime of his career. He had a great season. He broke 1,000 yards. He had 8 touchdowns. So I mean, he's there. So I think it all comes down to mental. I think it's part of the low of falling just barely short of yet another Super Bowl win, something that the Patriots don't do too often, which is why the rest of the league gets frustrated with seeing them in the Super Bowl all the time. But I could see it happen. I could see a world where he retires after his, what has it been, a 7-8 year career. But I don't know. I think he'll be back personally. So we'll see. And then, of course, one last bit of news we have to talk about: the inductees of the 2018 Pro Bowl Hall of Fame. So this isn't necessarily fantasy related, but look, we're all here because of a love of football as well. So a couple notable names: Brian Urlacher, no surprise there. He's played 13 seasons. Chicago Bears linebacker, so phenomenal job there. Terrell Owens, who has played on about half the teams in the league, wide receiver, including your Eagles at one point, CJ, of course.
Yep.
I would say most famously known for, what? I don't know. Where'd you,
I mean, I
what did
think
he
he's
retire
most
as?
famous. He left. I think his last games was with the Bills, I believe.
No, his final season
Oh,
was
the
with the Bengals, but
Bengals. Yeah, there you
what
go.
did he
I don't
retire
know.
as?
I
Was
don't
it a
know what he
49er?
retired as. I don't know what he retires
I'm
as.
going to look it up.
It could have been a Cowboy. He probably retired as a Cowboy. I know he didn't retire as an Eagle.
No.
But I mean, he's most famously known for his time with the Philly. I mean, he got him to the championship. The last time the Eagles actually played the Patriots, he was on that team, playing with a broken leg. So I mean, we appreciate his service, but once you put that star on, I mean, to be honest with me, I mean, you kind of RIP in my book. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So he. But yeah, man, it's much deserved. When you look at his numbers, I mean, his numbers speak for itself. You got to put it in there, and it felt like for a little bit, it was a popularity contest, and, and a lot of people still think that it is, and I agree with them. But you got at the end of the day, look, you gotta respect the man's numbers and give him his due. I mean, you can't put people in there, and I'm no disrespect to the other people that's went in there, but when you look at numbers and impact on the game, I mean, you got to put him in. You got to.
That's right. He did sign with the Seahawks, but he never actually played for them. In 2012, I can't find what team he actually retired for.
I don't think he ever did.
Well, regardless, we'll look.
Because he was trying to
That's true. He was trying to come back.
Yeah, he was trying to come back.
He
So I
went
don't
and played
think he ever
Arena League
officially
for the
did.
last couple of years. So,
Mhm.
all right. Well, yep. So Terrell Owens, Randy Moss, another wide receiver. Of course, I think we can all agree, most famously known for his phenomenal years as a New England Patriot, but bounced around the league. Obviously was drafted by the Vikings, played with the Raiders, the Patriots, Titans, 49ers, bounced around a little bit towards the end of his career. Kind of revolutionized the position, and some would argue. So, yeah, there you go, Randy Moss. I'm not going to say I was surprised by that because I honestly expected it, but I kind of forgot that he had retired that long ago. I don't know why in my mind I thought that he played more recently than that. Of course, a guy that I've been celebrating, Ray Lewis, Linebacker for the Baltimore Ravens got in. We've always said he was a first ballot Hall of Famer. A lot of people argue the best linebacker of all time. There you go. Jerry Kramer. So there's a guard for the Green Bay Packers right there. Played 11 seasons, and this was back, a lot of you probably wondering who was that. Played from 58 to 68, so just FYI. A guy that CJ might know, Brian Dawkins. You want to weigh in on him?
My man, my dude. Oh, man. The reason why, just a little peek behind the curtain, the reason why I became an Eagles fan was because of that dude right there. Just watching his play,
and
watching his enthusiasm, watching his passion on the field, man, and just a great role model, man, and just a great player, man. I love that dude Dawkins, man. He gets me pumped even to this day, and he's been out of the game for some years now. Just watching his tape, just hearing him talk, he makes you feel so ready to just run through a brick wall, man. I mean, I love that dude, man.
Safety for the Eagles. Played for 16 seasons, was there from 96 to, was it 2008, I think it was? And then he went to the Broncos, somewhere around that time frame. So, yeah. Let's see. Robert Brazil. So, played, again, older, 75 to 84, Houston Oilers. Linebacker, for those of you who don't know. And then Bobby Bethard. So, man, just a class of names that, normally when you see these lists, it's a lot of names that are spread out through the generations, but this is pretty heavy on the recent retirees. So there you go, your 2018 Pro Football Hall of Fame class, and of course this will be something that you'll hear a lot more about going forward as we get through the offseason and into the enshrinement pre the start of the 2018 season. So yeah, with that, let's get to why everybody is here, and we'll talk our topic of the day, which is some interesting facts from 2017. Now, I haven't gone through all of yours, CJ. I don't know if you've read through all of mine. Jason, of course, is not here, so he did not contribute. So everybody point and laugh at him when you hear him next, or send him a message on Twitter. But I think a common trend that this is something we've referenced, we talked about more on Patreon, that scoring, and we saw this from week 1 on, scoring was really down across the league this year. And, of course, we talk about how this is a league, and we mentioned this even earlier in the show, that has been gearing towards an more offensive, high-scoring, high thrills and excitement type league. Yet, here we are. Scoring is down, thus fantasy points are down. So this is, I think, ties into every single one of mine. Is that pretty much the same for you?
Yeah, mine's a little bit like that, and then, kind of giving me a little fun facts on some people that, should not be in your top 5, maybe position when it comes to maybe receiver.
All right. Well, I guess let's dive in then. And I'll actually start. I'll tie that all together right now. So lower points scored around the league, and starting at the wide receiver position, we can jump in right there, where only 18 wide receivers reached the 200-point threshold in full point per reception leagues. Only 2 of them did it in standard scoring leagues. That's it. The last time 18 or fewer wide receivers reached that 200-point threshold in points per reception league, full point, was back in 2003. Wow, that's a long freaking time. Wide receiver, and this is breaking it down even more case by case. Wide receivers scored only 20+ points in full point per reception leagues, only 153 times this season. That is the lowest since the stat was tracked back in 2000 in a single season. So, lows across the board for fantasy football, and obviously reflected into regular football as well. So that's yardage and touchdowns. Lows across the board. So here we are, just a few years removed from the running back disaster that we had in real life and thus fantasy. So everybody was talking the zero RB. Everybody load up on wide receivers. We had people arguing 5-6 rounds.
Wrong.
Yeah, the league has a way of correcting towards the norm, and here we are overcorrecting, I think we could argue, where wide receivers are just so much lower. And, of course, that also breaks down to the quarterback play, which is, I think, something that I know I'm going to touch on. I think you might as well. So, CJ, what are your thoughts here? Is this defense is getting better? Is this the league not holding up? Is this just a result of the CBA and these teams not being able to put in the time that they need to develop? Is it coaches changing teams, coordinators? I think it's kind of all the above, honestly.
Yeah, I was just want to say, I think it's a little bit of everything. And then it's just like you said the league is correcting itself, man. We saw a surgence this year, even when, minus the Zeke Elliott suspension and David Johnson injury, the running back position basically took over. These multi-purpose backs that can do it all, these dual threat backs, man, they kind of ate up into those wide receivers targets and those opportunities, man. So you saw all the numbers going down. I mean, I'm just looking at prime situations with with the Saints coming into this year, especially after the trade of Brandon Cooks. Everybody was, on the board with Michael Thomas, especially with the season he did the year before, and said this was going to be the year with him and Drew Brees. He's going to put up crazy numbers, and people drafted him on. And when you look at his numbers, you go back, he basically kind of he finished in the way he was going throughout the season, like a wide receiver 2 or even flex wide receiver. I mean, this is a guy that was drafted very high, be wide receiver 1, but put up basically wide receiver 2, borderline flex wide receiver numbers. I mean and that was just because the running back position. You got Ingram back there, and plus you had Kamara. Both of them were good catching the ball and were very effective in that offense. So you look at those offenses like that, and there was a lot of them across the league. That's why those wide receivers numbers were going down this year.
And teams are running more, I think, to slow down opposing offenses. So
right.
I mean, here we are. So yeah, that was an interesting fact that stood out to me. Just the overall just plummeting of efficiency from the wide receiver position. CJ, why don't you give me one?
I'll give you one real quick, man. So my guy Phillip Rivers, man, the crazy thing about this dude and the knock on him the last couple of years, man, and it's justifiably so, has been the offensive line. And it was like give up Phillip Rivers a good offensive line. He had the rookie, the crazy what was it, Mike Williams that was drafted by them.
Yeah.
Keenan Allen coming off of injuries, Terrell Williams there. You had
Travis
Antonio
Benjamin.
Gates, Travis Benjamin, all these weapons. We all agreed on this show, the most weapons he's ever had in his career this year. And then once again, what happened? Going into the season, they were plagued by injuries. Even so, this dude Phillip Rivers has finished eighth out of the past 9 seasons among top 11 quarterbacks, man. And right now, he's going in average draft position as the 13th quarterback. Right. Even with all of that, Phillip Rivers is still slinging that thing. Philly Rib, like I like to call him, still slinging that thing. And he's only going to get better. And one thing I love going into this next season is because those positions of need that they filled in the draft that got hurt, those offensive line players, they're coming back. They're going to have more experience, and they're still going to, make some even more moves, probably to better the defense, to be able to put them in better position. So that 13th is going to be a steal because, once again, I still see this dude not only finish in top 8, but I want him to finish top 5, and I still think he has the talent to do it.
Yep. I mean, he was a favorite amongst us as a show that we recommend to people. If you are adopting the late-round quarterback strategy, one that I obviously employ adamantly, he was a guy I was always targeting late in drafts, and it pays off. I mean, here's the stats to back it up. 8 of the last 9 seasons as a number 1 quarterback. And actually, my next stat, we'll jump right into mine. Drew Brees, Matthew Stafford, and Kirk Cousins are the only 3 quarterbacks to finish in the top 10 each of the last 3 seasons in standard scoring. So that's your typical 4-point per passing touchdown. If you adjust it to 6 points per passing touchdown or extend it to top 11, guess who also edges their way into this conversation? Phillip Rivers. So there you go. So that's an interesting thought for some of these guys that tend to slip in drafts. Drew Brees, obviously just a monster of a career. Matthew Stafford always seems to slip. So does Phillip Rivers. Kirk Cousins, gonna be interesting. I don't know. I don't know how he finishes this year because we don't know where he's gonna land.
Especially with this foolishness with the Redskins. I mean, it's gonna be interesting.
Indeed. So, again, there's some consistency, some guys that are, I think, going to slip in drafts again, and guys that you can definitely take outside of, some of these guys you'll see, your typical, Russell Wilson you'll probably see go early because he finished number 1. Aaron Rodgers will be back, Tom Brady, Cam Newton probably. All these guys you'll see going from rounds probably 3 to 6. That seems to be when they seem to go in your especially more casual drafts. So some of these guys that are consistently top 10 quarterbacks, if you're a believer in getting a guy and kind of sticking with him, these are guys that are worth that if you don't want to do the streaming option, which, as we talked about as a show, if you took our analysis throughout the season and you started and you got the best guy out of the three of us every single week, you started a guy who exceeded the number one quarterback in fantasy by a good margin. So streaming a viable option as well. But again, Drew Brees, Matt Stafford, Kirk Cousins, Phillip Rivers, all guys to keep an eye on for your fantasy drafts, especially depending on where Kirk Cousins lands. CJ, give me another one.
Give me another one, man. I want to stick with this quarterback position because I like what we're sounding, man. It sounds good information, man. So look, in 2017, we saw 12 signal callers reach the 250 fantasy point mark. That's the fewest since 2012. The quarterback scored a combined 7,943 fantasy points, which is the fewest in the last 6 seasons. The all-time record is 8,628 points, which was set in 2015.
Yep.
So once again, I mean, this kind of once again goes back to hand in hand. We were talking about earlier about these running backs coming back and basically taking the league back over.
Yep.
They had a year off last season, and then they just came back and snatched that thing and forced the ball out of these quarterbacks' hands, which is crazy. Just like Griffin was talking about, in a league right now that's basically being molded and crafted into passing the ball, high power passing offenses.
Yep.
This year, the running backs took the air out of the ball and they ran that thing. So it was crazy, man.
Yeah. And go figure, 2015 was when they set the record, then that was the year where the running backs imploded. So, not really much of a surprise there. I guess let's go to the running back position, actually. I've got a couple fun ones. Let's start with Pittsburgh Steelers running back Le'Veon Bell, who led the league in touches with 406 touches. That's a pretty substantial workload, as we were talking about pretty early in the season. This is a guy who seemingly they thought, well, we're not going to get him back, so we're just going to run him into the ground and get our money's worth out of him since he was franchise tagged. Well, he also led the league in rushing attempts, 321 rushing attempts, no surprise there. He was the only running back to top 300 rushing attempts threshold, so nobody else got there. Last time that there was more than one 300 rushing attempt person was in 2012, though. So this was not that abnormal. There's usually one player that gets there, and the rest of them fall just short. In 2012, there was 3 of them, and it was Adrian Peterson, Alfred Morris, and Doug Martin, of all people. So how do you like that? So interesting, for sure. But obviously upside of Le'Veon Bell there, further making that statement if he stays in Pittsburgh, the value that he has there. But on the opposite side of the spectrum, we'll talk about how Pittsburgh, and good news if he does leave. Pittsburgh has had a top 4 running back each of the last 4 seasons. So Le'Veon Bell, obviously, in 2014, 16, and 17. D'Angelo Williams in 2015 when they didn't have Bell for the majority of the year. But the last time a running back reached a 400 touch threshold in a single season, 400-plus touches, their following season, their production decreased by an average of about 186 points. So that would make him the running back 26 this season. So something to maybe pay attention to.
You got to.
A thought, that workload, you think they've got a long offseason to recover. Not really, because there's a lot of off-season conditioning, and they're right back in it. They're doing football drills, and that's a lot of wear and tear on the body. We've seen that it takes a year or two to kind of bounce back from that. Now, Le'Veon Bell, he's pretty consistently had a good-sized workload. I mean, I don't know if I'm
to the point where you think he kind of got he gets used to it, but I mean it's still a human's body. I mean he's
exactly
still, he's still flesh and blood. He's not a machine, so
right. He'll be another year older. And he's coming off a 400-plus touch season, and we don't know where he's going to be. It sounds like he will be returning to Pittsburgh, which, as we know, agrees with him because they can't just stack the box against him because of all the wide receivers there. Big Ben slinging it under center. But it's something to keep an eye out for because this is a guy who's going to be drafted, I guarantee you, as a top 3 fantasy running back. And there could be a drop-off coming. So I'm not going to say he's going to drop off to the point he shouldn't be drafted. I mean, let's not be crazy here. But to think that he's going to repeat this 400-touch workload, I know the Steelers love to just give one guy the rock and just tell him to go make it happen. But I think that they're going to have to back off, especially if they're making a long-term financial commitment to the guy. So I would pump the brakes if you're hoping for him to get this many touches again next year. CJ, give me one.
All right, man. So I got a two-parter, man. So this is kind of like my argument with Julio Jones and people saying that that last mock draft we did. What was he like, the fourth or fifth wide receiver, or what was it? He was the third or fourth, right? Something crazy
he
like
was
that.
top three, I think. I'll
Top
bring it
three,
up.
top three. So here's my little argument with it. Now look, Julio Jones, he scored 8 or fewer fantasy points 9 times this past season. All right, 201. All right, he scored 6 or fewer fantasy points 7 times, including the 2 that he missed due to injury. Despite those inconsistent stats, he still finished sixth in fantasy points among wide receivers in the last 2 campaigns. Okay, cool, that's awesome. But listen, what we know and what we see with the trend with Julio is he's a boomer bust guy. I mean, outside this past season, those seasons ago, with those Tampa Bay games where he went off and had those crazy games. Outside of that, Griffin, my statistician,
Yep.
he shows you that he is very average, very mediocre, very inconsistent. Things you don't want to hear when it comes to a guy that you're putting a first round pick on and a guy that you might put in your top 3 wide receivers. You don't want to hear those stats when it comes to that, but that keeps following, plaguing Julio Jones. And my second part with this was Steve Cartesian. When you look back, this is the thing, guys, ladies and gentlemen. Look, this is the thing when it comes to these new offensive coordinators that are coming in. I'm going to do a deep dive on Nerf Turner and how I believe that him and Christian McCaffrey will be a good marriage because I did the research. I went back and look at the trends. Here's the trends with Steve Cartesian. His teams are dink and dunk offenses, man. Now listen, Steve Cartesian, he tried his best to get Julio Jones involved and get him in scoring position this season. You know what I'm saying? Julio finished with the third most in red zone targets with 19 in the NFL. But what the thing is ridiculous that he only brought in 2 of those 19s into touchdowns in the red zone. 2 out of 19.
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to fantasy football, last time I checked, I mean, you do get more points scoring touchdowns than it is in yards, right? I mean, I believe that's a stat where you maybe get maybe 6 or 5, depending what league you are. So that's a little better. I mean, of course, PPR, the touches are nice, but the touchdowns is what you want when it comes to these top wide receivers that you're drafting so high. So, hey, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to make my case one more time. Julio Jones should not be a top 3 wide receiver. At best, he should be number 5. And he's going to be number 5 or even lower in my rankings, and he should be on yours. Ladies and gentlemen, the stats are there, and the stats do not lie.
Yeah, this is something that we're going to talk about a lot more as we get into the offseason. And if you're new to the show, first off, welcome. Hello. Hi. We're not crazy. We have a lot of stats to back this up, and we've seen it year after year after year. Yes, he always finishes as a number 1 wide receiver, but that's great. That's great if you're one of those people who look at the end of season stats and say, "Oh, I got to have that guy." But owning Julio Jones is one of the most frustrating things you can do in fantasy football. This is a guy who, in a mock draft that we just did a couple weeks ago, I found it, CJ. He went as the number 7 pick, the number 2 wide receiver off the board behind Antonio Brown. So, I mean, yeah, I know. Oh, well, he's finishing the top. He's been a number 1 wide receiver each of the last 4 years. Yes, I know. The last 2 years, number 6. The year before that, number 2. And then the year before that, I think it was number 8, if I remember correctly, in standard scoring. But guess what? Owning him, he will lose you so many weeks. And then he gives you 1 week where he just blows the roof off of it. And, 300-plus yards, a touchdown like he did just 2 years ago. Or a 200-something yard game this past year. But week to week, you need those points to win your games, and he's not going to get them for you. So, I mean, if you want to dive into this end-of-year total, which is something we highly, highly, highly recommend you don't do, because that's what the norms do, which is why he goes as high as he does, you're going to lose weeks. You don't build a strong team with Julio Jones as your number 1 wide receiver because you need a floor, and he doesn't have one. He's a low-floor, high-ceiling player, and the way this team is built, the floor is much more common than the ceiling. And as you just said, their new offensive coordinator, which we saw a change this year, even promising that they're going to get him more involved in the red zone, where last year with Kyle Shanahan, he had 1,400 yards and 6 touchdowns. This year, they got him back there, 1,400 yards, but 3 touchdowns. So all this talk about from the team and the head coach and the offensive coordinator saying, we're going to get our, as they should, prototypical, amazing, elite wide receiver more involved in the red zone. Didn't translate. He got half as many touchdowns. So
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree. Julio Jones, a freak athlete, an amazing talent, a unbelievable weapon for any real-life football team, but for fantasy, he will crush you.
Yeah.
Let me see how we're doing on time. Oh, we're already over. So I'll wrap it up. I'll do one more real quick, and then we'll do the rest on Patreon. So let's see. I want to point out something in Carolina. So Carolina, a team that's kind of in flux, and we talk about and we hear about all the time. You know, there's Cam Newton. This team is going to be a better offense. They're making changes to their coordinators. They've got obviously Christian McCaffrey there, so they're going to get this offense going. Well, it didn't really happen this year. Christian McCaffrey, 435 rushing yards, so not great. He had more receiving yards than rushing, which is not too surprising because obviously he wasn't the only back in that backfield. But this just puts another cherry on top of Carolina's longest active streak in the NFL without a 1,000-yard rusher. Their last time they had a 1,000-yard rusher was back in 2009 when both D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart both reached that threshold. So if you're drafting a Carolina Panthers running back, the floor gets a little bit sketchy right there. So I mentioned Cam Newton, obviously. He did really well this year. He actually led the team with 754 rushing yards. And this is after we've been hearing how they want to get the ball out of his hands more. And here he is rushing for a career high. So I expect that to drop, which might translate more to the running backs. But it's confusing. And it's frustrating, especially if you're owning Christian McCaffrey, because people invested a pretty high capital on the guy, and he finished as a running back too. This also makes Cam Newton, a little bit of a side note, this is some fun side research, this makes him the second quarterback in the league's history to lead his team in rushing total in multiple seasons. The only other person to do it, Randall Cunningham. So, I mean, Cam Newton, you know, he's not old, but he's getting up there. As I mentioned, they talked last year about wanting him to pass more, get the ball out of his hands, keep him healthy. The exact opposite happened this year. So, I mean, maybe, yeah, they get Greg Olsen back for a full season. Christian McCaffrey and his rapport grows. They get another weapon. We could see it, but none of this really translates to the running game, and obviously deflates Cam Newton, who I would say, I mean, what did he finish this year in standard scoring as a top 5 quarterback? So I bet he's going to be drafted somewhere in the top 10, and he's either going, this has been his career, where he finishes either really high or not nearly returning on value, and I'd see nothing changing here. Jason and I always contest that he's not a great pocket passer, and I think if they force him to pass the ball more, his ceiling obviously comes down. CJ, I know you're a little bit more defending of the guy, but I mean, it's a scary predicament. You know, this whole rushing distribution in Carolina translating to their quarterback, his passing. It's a cluster, and something obviously we'll deep dive into, and we don't have a lot of time to get into it now because we're over. But anything you want to add, CJ?
I was gonna say, I mean, we can't really do a deep dive now, but like I said, I think this was a bad situation. This past season, they kind of had like a little of a boring offense when it comes down to anything, and it was just like it kind of reached its head where it was just like, you know, Ron Rivera was like, look, all right, we're keep hitting our head against the wall. Cam, go out there and do something, and then that's when stuff started happening. I think, you know, and I could be wrong, but I just look back at the numbers when I see North Turner and what he's done to running backs and his his past history. You see a little bit of a trend where this probably was going to be good for Cam because the running backs are going to get more involved, and then that means the receivers can probably be better for him, and he has less windows, you know, tougher windows to look at, and that'll probably put his numbers back up. I'm just going off of what I see, and of course, you know, you got to see it on the field. But when I look at the numbers and look at the history, it looks promising.
Yeah. Oh, well, obviously, time will tell. We'll see, and we'll deep dive more as we start recapping the players and start getting to our rankings of next year. And obviously, free agency and the draft will be pretty darn telling as well. But we are out of here. 2-man show went over an hour. Look at us, CJ. So, yeah, that's going to do it for us today. Please make sure you guys tune in on Friday when we will be talking our quarterback review of 2017. We're going to break down who finished where, what happened, how they got there, all the stats and the trends you need to know for projecting them forward into 2018. As always, make sure you guys subscribe wherever you're listening. We are a year-round show. The off-season, now we're switching gears. Now it gets interesting, and now we get to really start diving into, like we're going to be doing, obviously, next week, what happened. It's a lot of fun, guys. Stick with us. And as we move forward into further off-season production, draft, free agency, rookies, off-season training camps, rankings, everything, all the important stuff. And, of course, IDP and a lot of good recaps as well. But a lot of that more is on Patreon. If you want to follow the show, you can find us basically anywhere on social media. But if you want to interact with us, easiest ways are on Facebook at facebook.com/thefantasyfootballfanatics. Or you can follow us on Twitter, and this is with 3 Fs, at the FF Fanatics. Or you can follow us individually. I'm at G Palmer FFF, and CJ's at CJ Hickman 89. So with that, we are out of here. Any parting thoughts, CJ?
Yo, Adrian, this was for you, baby. We got one, baby. We got one.
And most of your nucleus under contract, so it's going to be very interesting to see this team going forward. Mm-hmm. Carson Wentz being back, of course. So, yeah. Again, lots of stuff to get into. The offseason is young, and we're switching gears into it. So, everybody, stick with us. We'll be back on Friday with the quarterback review. Take care, guys. We'll see you then. Bye.